Hey everybody, it's Jeremy, and welcome to a new episode of Sipping with Jeremy. And for the second time, we're going to be talking about Barber Lee Spirits out of Petaluma, California. Now, for those of you who didn't watch our first episode where I talked about Barber Lee's single barrel pick that we did with them, I'll make sure to put that link below so you can check that out and get some more information on the company itself. But just a quick recap, Barber Lee Spirits is located out of Petaluma, California, and they are a grain to barrel distillery, meaning that they start with the grain and go all the way to the bottling process. That means they're not sourcing anything. Everything is done by them in Petaluma, California. And they have no heavy machinery in their distillery, so everything is done by hand as much as possible. Today we're going to be talking about their moonshine, their heirloom bourbon, and their single malt rye. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the moonshine. The moonshine, or white dog, is basically just unaged whiskey. So anytime you have whiskey that comes off the still, it comes off clear, and it's the aging that gives it its brown coloring. And for their moonshine, Barber Lee is using their single malt rye, which is pretty unique. Typically with a moonshine, you're going to do more corn because it is traditionally sweeter. But Barber Lee's really cool. Their processes are very unique. So their rye is pretty mellow on its own. We'll get to the review of that later. But let's go ahead and try this moonshine right now. So because this is unaged whiskey, there is definitely a little bit of a bite to this. Think of kind of more of your agricole white rums, or in that kind of realm where there's that little bit of kind of like raw distillate flavor profile. I mean, there is this because typically with these kind of spirits, you are aging them. That's going to soften that flavor. So if you have it on its own, it is going to have a little bit of a bite. But with that, there is still a lot of tropical fruit notes here, a little bit more melon. There is some really nice apple characteristics, and you get a really nice rye spice too. That rye spice does pull out a little bit more of that kind of raw distillate flavor profile, but it does also bring out a little bit more of an appley finish too. So definitely some depth here. Again, typically with your moonshines or your white dogs, you're not getting a whole lot of characteristics. You're just kind of getting that raw distillate profile and maybe like a little bit of sweetness that you can get from the idea of whatever the grain is you're using. There definitely is some layering of flavors in this moonshine, which makes it stand out and just adds to the unique profile that is the Barber Lee Spirits. Now let's go ahead and move on to their bourbon. So Barber Lee makes their bourbon with Hopi Blue and Bloody Butcher corn. It is double distilled in a copper pot still and aged for 2 to 4 years. Let's go ahead and give it a try. So the first noticeable thing for this bourbon is on the nose. There are these aromatics that are super unique, and it's because of those heirloom corns that Barber Lee is using. Because they're using these different corns, you're getting these characteristics on the nose, the more butterscotchy, appley compote kind of idea there. Just these really unique aromatics that you don't get on your typical white corn or yellow corn bourbon. So that's just one of those things that helps this stand out. On the flavor profile as well, there's just a lot of layering and a lot of really cool flavors. So I definitely get a maple syrup, softer kind of brown sugary idea. There's a lot of red apple fruit though to help balance that out. You do get this really nice kind of floral rye aspect there too. There's a little bit of a toasted cinnamon flavor as well. But this all has like a really nice layering to it. There's a soft note of butterscotch on the finish. So there's a lot of rich flavors, but there's some nice rye spice in there, as I mentioned, to help kind of balance everything out. And it just kind of coats the palate really softly and just rounds out. Does, again, finish off a little sweeter, but just really unique profile here. There are a lot of characteristics that you will get in a bourbon, but they're typically different styles of bourbon, where this one is putting them all together. So again, making it a little bit more unique in its flavor profile than your standard blended bourbon. So now that we've had the bourbon, let's go ahead and try the single malt rye. So Barber Lee's single malt rye is made also in their custom copper pot still, distilled twice, and aged for 2 to 4 years. And this is actually the spirit that got me hip to what Barber Lee is. So last year in 2023, I was in Lake Tahoe with my fiance, and we were at a bar called States Line. It was predominantly a pizza and brewery, but at the basement they had a really cool whiskey bar. And on this whiskey bar, there was just lines of really nice whiskeys, stuff I was familiar with, stuff I wasn't. And one that really drew my attention was a square bottle with a leather cover. And I saw it, I was like, oh, what is that? So I looked it up, and the price, was pretty fair for an ounce pour. So I asked our bartender for one, and I was blown away. I actually stopped as I was tasting it and emailed myself the name so I could remember it. So when I got back from vacation, I can look into it. And that is kind of how I found Barber Lee, was just randomly at this bar in Tahoe, drawn to it by this, square bottle with a leather label, and was blown away by the flavor profile. Let me go ahead and retry it for you guys. So this is no surprise, but this is still delicious to me. It's a great combination of like red and green apples up front. You get that floral classic rye profile. There's some dark cocoa characteristics there as well. You get a little bit more of like a cereal, more of that kind of cereal milky sweetness on the back end. Kind of like, the milk at the end of a cereal bowl where it has a little bit of that graininess, but a little bit more sweetness from that, like a little bit of vanilla or a little bit of creaminess from the milk itself. So yeah, again, just another idea of a whiskey that has a lot of layers to it. As it's opening up on my palate, I'm getting a little bit more butterscotch, getting some softer kind of like maple notes as well. So it's getting a little bit of the characteristics from the bourbon in this too, which is pretty cool. And then just more kind of fruit on the finish too. A little bit more peachy on the back end, but definitely some more apple too. So just really nice layers on this whiskey. And yeah, again, like I said, I tried this at a bar and had to email myself the name to make sure I remembered it. So when I went home, I can pick it up. And I'm glad I did, because now we carry everything from Barber Lee whiskey-wise. We have our single barrel pick. We still have a few bottles of that left if anybody's interested in that. Remember, you can check out the video below for that too. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this episode of Sipping with Jeremy. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to press like, and don't forget to subscribe. Barber Lee, I think, is really cool. I'm very happy to be working with them. I like how it was a random act. I found them, and I'm so happy that we have gotten good responses from our customers who have tried our single barrel pick from them, or people who have picked up just the bourbon in general or the single malt rye and have really enjoyed it. But thank you very much for joining us. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. See y'all down the road. Drink well.